A tech billionaire walks into his ex-wife's gender reveal party, smugly serves her divorce papers in front of everyone, thinking he's won. But what he doesn't know is that she's been building a secret empire worth 3 times his fortune. His world is about to crumble. Before we dive into the shocking tale of betrayal and karma, hit that like button if you love stories where the underdog gets the last laugh. And don't forget to subscribe because we're bringing you the most jaw-dropping, real-life stories you won't hear anywhere else. Let me paint you a picture of two people who seem destined for greatness together. Victoria Sterling and Blake Harrison met at Stanford Business School in 2012. And honestly, they were the kind of couple that made everyone else jealous. Victoria was this brilliant black woman from Detroit who had clawed her way to Stanford on pure talent and determination. Blake was the golden boy from old money, charming and confident, with connections that opened doors before he even knocked. They weren't just lovers. They were partners in every sense of the word. Victoria had this incredible mind for artificial intelligence and software development, while Blake had the business acumen and, let's be honest, the face that investors wanted to see. Together, they created something beautiful, a tech startup called Neural Dynamics that was going to revolutionize how companies process data. But here's where the fairy tale starts to crack. As their company grew, something ugly began to surface. Investors would walk into meetings and automatically assume Blake was the tech genius, even though Victoria was the one who built everything from the ground up. Blake started going along with it. At first, it was small things, letting investors think he coded the algorithms, taking credit for Victoria's innovations in board meetings. Victoria tried to speak up, but Blake would smooth things over privately, promising her that once they made it big, everyone would know the truth. The truth never came. Instead, Blake systematically pushed Victoria out of her own company. He restructured the leadership, giving himself the CEO title while making Victoria some vague Chief Innovation Officer position that sounded important but had no real power. When Victoria confronted him, Blake fed her lines about how the investors were more comfortable with him as the face of the company. "It's just business, baby," he would say. "You know I couldn't do this without you." But Victoria wasn't stupid. She could see the writing on the wall. When Blake filed for divorce 3 years ago, she made a decision that everyone thought was insane. She walked away. She took a settlement that seemed ridiculously small for someone who had built a company worth hundreds of millions. People whispered that she was either too proud or too naive to fight for what she deserved. Blake kept Neural Dynamics, and within 2 years, he had turned it into a billion-dollar empire. Meanwhile, Victoria seemed to disappear. She moved into a modest apartment in Oakland, started driving an older car, and kept an extremely low profile. She had custody of their 8-year-old daughter, Harmony, and from the outside, it looked like she was struggling to make ends meet on Blake's alimony payments. Blake loved telling people at parties about his ex-wife who thought she was smarter than the market. What nobody knew, not Blake, not their mutual friends, not even Victoria's closest family, was that Victoria had been planning something extraordinary. For 3 years, she had been living like a ghost, deliberately staying under the radar while building something that would make Neural Dynamics look like a lemonade stand. The stage was set for the most spectacular downfall in Silicon Valley history. Blake Harrison thought he had won everything: the company, the reputation, the billions. He was about to learn that some victories are just elaborate setups for the most devastating defeats. And it all started with a gender reveal party that Victoria threw for her new baby, the life she was building after Blake had tried to destroy her. Blake had no idea that walking into that party would be the beginning of the end of everything he thought he owned. The moment Blake Harrison walked into Victoria's gender reveal party, the entire atmosphere shifted. Picture this. Victoria had rented a beautiful community center in Oakland, decorated with soft pink and blue balloons, surrounded by about 30 of her closest friends and family. Everyone was laughing, sharing stories, celebrating the new life Victoria was bringing into the world with her partner David. It was intimate, warm, and full of love, exactly the kind of gathering that Blake couldn't stand because it had nothing to do with him. But Blake didn't come alone. He strutted in wearing his $1,000 suit, flanked by his lawyer, carrying a manila envelope like it was some kind of trophy. The conversation stopped. People turned to stare. Victoria was standing near the gift table, her hand resting on her 7-month belly. And I swear to you, she didn't even flinch when she saw him. She just watched him approach with this calm expression that should have been his first warning sign. "Victoria," Blake announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I'm sorry to interrupt your little party, but we have some business to discuss." He gestured to his lawyer, who stepped forward with that predatory smile that expensive attorneys perfect. "I'm serving you with papers demanding full custody of Harmony. It's time our daughter lived with a parent who can actually provide for her." The room went dead silent. Victoria's friends looked horrified. Her mother started to stand up, but Victoria held up a hand to stop her. Meanwhile, Blake was just getting started. He launched into this speech about how Victoria was clearly unstable and living beyond her means on his alimony payments. He pointed around the room, talking about how she was playing house with David while failing to provide a proper home for their daughter. "Look at the facts," Blake said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "She lives in a rundown apartment in Oakland, drives a car that's older than some of the kids here, and has no visible means of income. Meanwhile, Harmony could be living in a mansion in Palo Alto, attending the best private schools, having every advantage money can buy." Blake's lawyer chimed in, explaining how they had documentation of Victoria's limited resources and how a prolonged custody battle would financially destroy her. "Mr. Harrison is prepared to fight this for years if necessary," the lawyer said smoothly. "He has unlimited resources, while Ms. Sterling clearly does not." But here's what struck me most about this whole scene. Victoria never lost her composure. While her friends were gasping and whispering, while her mother was crying quietly in the corner, Victoria stood there with her hands folded, listening to Blake systematically try to destroy her life in front of everyone she loved. Her only tell was the slight tremor in her fingers, barely visible, but it was there. Blake saved his cruelest blow for last. He looked around the room at Victoria's friends and family, then turned back to her with this smug smile. "I tried to be generous when we divorced, Victoria. I gave you more than you deserve for a woman who was lucky enough to ride my coattails for a few years. But now I see you're just a gold digger who got lucky once and thinks she can keep living off my success forever." The silence that followed was deafening. Blake tucked the custody papers under Victoria's arm, nodded to his lawyer, and headed for the door. "See you in court," he called over his shoulder. "Try to find a good lawyer. You're going to need one." After he left, Victoria's friends rushed to comfort her, but she just stood there, staring at the papers in her hands. What none of them knew was that Victoria wasn't devastated. She was calculating. The trap had been set, and Blake had just walked right into it. After Blake's humiliating exit, Victoria's best friend Naomi stayed behind to help clean up the party. But something was bothering her. Something about the way Victoria had handled the whole situation. Most people would have been in tears, calling lawyers, panicking about losing their child. But Victoria? She was methodically folding napkins and packing up decorations like nothing had happened. "V, are you okay?" Naomi finally asked, watching her friend calmly stack chairs. "Because if I were you, I'd be losing my mind right now." Victoria looked up with this strange, almost peaceful expression. "I'm fine, Naomi, really. Blake thinks he knows everything, but he doesn't know anything at all." There was something in her voice, not sadness, not fear, but something that sounded almost like anticipation. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Victoria's reaction, about how composed she had been. So she did what any good friend would do. She started digging. At first, it was innocent curiosity. She Googled Victoria's name, thinking maybe her friend had gotten a new job she hadn't mentioned. But what she found made no sense. Victoria's LinkedIn profile showed her as a freelance consultant, but when Naomi tried to find out who she was consulting for, she hit dead ends. There were business registrations under Victoria's name, but they were all tied to LLCs with generic names like Sterling Solutions and Pacific Tech Holdings. The addresses led to P.O. boxes and virtual offices. Then Naomi started noticing things about Victoria's lifestyle that didn't add up. That rundown apartment Blake had mocked? Naomi had been there dozens of times, and sure, it was modest from the outside, but the inside was filled with the most sophisticated computer equipment she'd ever seen. Multiple monitors, servers humming quietly in a back room, fiber optic cables running along the walls. For someone supposedly living off alimony, Victoria had some seriously expensive tech. And that old car Blake had ridiculed? Naomi took a closer look the next time she visited. It wasn't just any old car. It was a Tesla Model S. But something was different about it. The dashboard had interfaces she'd never seen before. And when she asked Victoria about it, her friend just smiled and said it was a prototype a friend let me borrow. The pieces started falling into place when Naomi decided to really dig deep. She spent hours searching business databases, patent filings, and SEC records. She started cross-referencing Victoria's maiden name, Victoria Chen Williams, with various business entities. What she found made her hands shake. Victoria Chen Williams was listed as the founder and CEO of something called Quantum Dynamics AI Solutions. The company was registered in Delaware, had offices in 12 countries, and according to the filings, had generated over $200 million in revenue in the past year alone. But here's the kicker. The company specialized in artificial intelligence software that powered data processing for major corporations. Naomi's blood ran cold when she realized what this meant. She pulled up Neural Dynamics' website and started reading about their core technology. Everything Blake's company claimed to have developed sounded eerily similar to the patents filed by Victoria's company. In fact, when Naomi dug deeper into the patent database, she discovered that Victoria owned the foundational patents for the AI algorithms that Neural Dynamics used. The woman Blake had called a gold digger, the woman he claimed was living off his charity, owned the intellectual property that his entire billion-dollar empire was built on. Victoria hadn't just walked away from their marriage. She had been systematically documenting every piece of technology she had created, every algorithm she had developed, and every innovation Blake had stolen credit for. As Naomi sat in her apartment at 3 in the morning, surrounded by printouts of business filings and patent documents, she realized she was looking at the most elaborate long-term strategy she had ever witnessed. Victoria hadn't disappeared after the divorce. She had been building an empire in the shadows, and Blake had no idea he was about to lose everything. The next morning, Naomi showed up at Victoria's apartment with a stack of printouts and a look of absolute disbelief on her face. Victoria opened the door, took one look at her friend's expression, and simply said, "I guess you figured it out." What Victoria revealed over the next hour was nothing short of breathtaking. For the past 3 years, while everyone thought she was struggling as a single mother, Victoria had been building the most sophisticated AI empire in Silicon Valley. Quantum Dynamics AI Solutions wasn't just successful, it was revolutionary. The company had developed artificial intelligence software that could process and analyze data faster and more accurately than anything on the market. "Remember when Blake used to brag about neural dynamics being cutting edge?" Victoria asked, pulling up her company's client list on her laptop. "Well, 60% of the Fortune 500 companies that use AI for data processing are actually using my software. They just don't know it because I license it through third-party vendors." The scope of Victoria's operation was staggering. She had been working 18-hour days, coding from her home office while Harmony was at school, taking meetings with international clients during her daughter's bedtime. She had deliberately kept her company's profile low, operating through a network of shell companies and licensing agreements that made it nearly impossible to trace back to her. But here's the most brilliant part. Blake's own company, Neural Dynamics, was one of her biggest customers. The AI algorithms that had made Blake a billionaire were actually Victoria's creations, licensed through a complex web of third-party agreements. Blake had been unknowingly paying his ex-wife millions of dollars in licensing fees for years, never realizing that the technology that made him famous was hers. Every patent Blake thinks he owns, every algorithm Neural Dynamics claims to have developed. "I have the original documentation proving I created them during our marriage," Victoria explained, showing Naomi folder after folder of time-stamped code, development notes, and prototype designs. "I've been building this case for 3 years, documenting every piece of intellectual property he stole from me." Victoria's net worth wasn't just impressive, it was astronomical. Her company was valued at over $4 billion, making her nearly 3 times wealthier than Blake. But she had been living modestly, deliberately maintaining the appearance of financial struggle while secretly accumulating power and influence. The strategic genius went even deeper. Victoria had been quietly purchasing shares in Neural Dynamics through various shell companies and investment firms. Over the course of 2 years, she had accumulated a 31% stake in Blake's company, making her the largest single shareholder. Blake had been so focused on his public image and his lifestyle that he never paid attention to who was buying his company's stock. "I own more of Neural Dynamics than Blake does," Victoria said with a quiet satisfaction. "I've been to every shareholder meeting, voting through proxy, watching him make decisions about a company that's actually mine. The board doesn't even know who I am, but they've been following my strategic recommendations for months." Victoria had also been documenting Blake's business practices, recording his discriminatory behavior toward women and minority employees, his unethical treatment of contractors, and his habit of taking credit for other people's work. She had built an airtight case that would not only expose his theft of her intellectual property, but also destroy his reputation in the tech industry. "Blake thinks he humiliated me at that party," Victoria said, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. "But what he actually did was give me the perfect opportunity to reveal everything. He wants a custody battle. Fine. But he's about to learn that you can't fight someone who owns the ground you're standing on." The trap was set, and Blake Harrison was about to walk into the most devastating corporate takeover in Silicon Valley history. 2 weeks after the gender reveal party disaster, Blake Harrison walked into the Neural Dynamics boardroom feeling like he owned the world. He had called an emergency board meeting to discuss exciting new expansion opportunities, completely unaware that his largest shareholder had called her own meeting for the exact same time. Blake strutted in wearing his signature arrogant smile, ready to dazzle his board with another one of his grand visions. But when he opened the conference room door, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, sitting in his chair at the head of the table, was Victoria. She was wearing a sharp business suit, her pregnancy barely showing, and she had that same calm expression she'd worn at the party. But this time, she wasn't standing quietly in the corner. She was in complete control. "Hello, Blake," Victoria said, her voice steady and professional. "Please have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." Blake's face went through about 6 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, anger, disbelief, and then pure panic. "What the hell is this? Security!" he shouted, looking around the room for support. But the board members were all staring at him with expressions that ranged from uncomfortable to downright hostile. "Mr. Harrison," said Patricia Webb, the board's senior member, "I think you should sit down. We've just learned some very interesting information about our company's ownership structure." Victoria opened a sleek tablet and projected documents onto the conference room screen. "Blake, meet Victoria Chen Williams, founder and CEO of Quantum Dynamics AI Solutions, and as of this morning, the majority shareholder of Neural Dynamics with 31% ownership." The room was dead silent as Blake processed what he was seeing. Share certificates, purchase agreements, proxy voting records, all showing that his ex-wife had been systematically buying his company out from under him for 2 years. "That's impossible," Blake whispered, his face going pale. "You're nobody. You have nothing." "Actually," Victoria continued, clicking to the next slide, "I have everything, including the original patents for every piece of technology Neural Dynamics claims to own. The screen filled with patent filings, development notes, and time-stamped code, all bearing Victoria's digital signature, all predating Neural Dynamics' supposed innovations." Blake's lawyer, who had been so confident at the gender reveal party, was frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to figure out how to get out of this nightmare. The board members were passing documents back and forth, and their faces were getting grimmer by the minute. "Here's what's going to happen," Victoria said, standing up slowly. "The board is going to vote on new leadership, effective immediately. I'm taking over as CEO of Neural Dynamics, which, let's be honest, should have been my position from the beginning since I actually built this company." Blake finally found his voice. "You can't do this. I'll fight you. With what money?" Victoria interrupted. "Your personal assets are being frozen pending investigation into intellectual property theft. Your custody case? Well, it's hard to prove you can provide for a child when you're about to lose everything you own. The SEC is very interested in how you've been claiming ownership of patents that belong to someone else." The final blow came when Victoria pulled out a folder and slid it across the table to Blake. I'm prepared to offer you a position as junior development consultant, reporting directly to me. Salary is $60,000 a year. Take it or leave it. Blake Harrison, the man who had publicly humiliated Victoria just 2 weeks earlier, was now sitting in a boardroom he no longer controlled, staring at a job offer from the woman he thought he had destroyed. The empire he had built on stolen dreams was crumbling, and the woman he had underestimated was rising from the ashes, more powerful than he had ever been. Karma, it turned out, was a brilliant businesswoman with a long memory and an even longer game. And that, my friends, is how Victoria Sterling became the most powerful woman in Silicon Valley, while her ex-husband learned the hardest lesson of his life. Blake Harrison went from billionaire to broke in a single boardroom meeting, all because he underestimated the woman who had built his empire in the first place. The last I heard, Blake took that junior consultant position because, honestly, what choice did he have? His custody case collapsed when his financial world imploded, and Harmony gets to stay with the parent who actually fought for her, not with lawyers and money, but with love and patience. Victoria's new baby was born into a world of security and success, surrounded by a family that understands what real strength looks like. But here's what gets me about this whole story. Victoria could have destroyed Blake years ago. She had the evidence. She had the power. She had every right to expose him the moment he pushed her out of their company. Instead, she played the longest game I've ever seen, building an empire so vast and so sophisticated that when she finally revealed herself, there was no way for him to fight back. This story proves something I've always believed. Never, ever underestimate someone just because they're quiet about their success. The most dangerous people aren't the ones making noise. They're the ones working in silence, building something bigger than you can imagine while you're busy bragging about what you think you've accomplished. Victoria didn't just get revenge, she got justice. And sometimes, just sometimes, those two things are exactly the same. So what do you think? Was Victoria's 3-year plan the most brilliant takedown you've ever heard, or should she have struck back sooner? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I absolutely love hearing your perspectives on these stories. And listen, if this story gave you chills, if it made you believe that karma really does come for people who deserve it, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, don't just think about it, do it. We're bringing you stories like this every single week. Stories about underdogs who rise up, bullies who get what's coming to them, and plot twists that will leave you speechless. Make sure you ring that notification bell too, because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. We've got stories about secret heirs, corporate espionage, and family betrayals that make this look like a fairy tale. These are the stories that prove reality is stranger than fiction, and karma is more patient than we ever imagined. Until next time, remember, the quiet ones are always the most dangerous.